Hello everyone, and welcome back to Inside ArtScroll, where the books you read and the people who write them come to life. Today we are privileged to be joined by Rabbi Ron Yitzchok Eisenman, Rav of Ahavas Israel in Passaic, and the author of a book that came out some years ago, Shul With A View. Thank you, Rabbi Eisenman, for joining us today for this conversation.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here today.
Thank you. Let's start off, as we often do, by hearing a little about your background, those who don't know where you grew up or who influenced you in your youth.
Well, let's start even honestly as with my name, which often gets a question. What's Ron Yitzchok? What's Ron? So my father, Zichron Livracha, was born in Yerushalayim, and he comes from an old family of Yerushalmim that actually came to Eretz Yisroel in 1812. And honestly, as we speak right now, I have the privilege, the schus of I don't know how many people can say this in the world. My grandchildren daven in the same shul that their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather davened in. Meaning the family came in 1812, Hoshana Rabbah, and Shlomo Zalman Tzoref, he was actually killed by the Arabs, the first victim of Arab terrorism in the new Yishuv. And he helped build the Churva Shul. And my son Meir, he's a tour guide, he lives literally 20, 30 feet from the Churva.
In Yerushalayim?
In Yerushalayim, in the Altstadt, in the Yer Atika, the old city. And that's where they davened. So they davened in the same shul where they davened in 200 years ago. So that's so my father, being Israeli, he came to America and he gave me this more like a modern Israeli name, like Ron, so like the masculine of Rina. So I was born in Brooklyn, and originally in Crown Heights. We moved to Canarsie, which was probably one of the shortest-lived Jewish neighborhoods in the history of New York City. It lasted from about 1965 to about 1985. And I went to yeshiva. My father, being Israeli, sent me to yeshiva Flatbush, so I would be fluent in Ivrit and Hebrew.
Was that co-ed at the time?
Yeah, it was co-ed at the time. It was honestly, there were some fantastic teachers there. Mm-hmm. Fantastic teachers there. Particularly was a teacher I remember who taught us machshava. It was the first time I was exposed to Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch, and it was a very inspirational experience, actually. Later, actually, I learned in Eretz Yisroel, and I had the schus of learning by Rabbi Ron Lichtenstein, who was the son-in-law of Rav Soloveitchik, Zichron Livracha.
Is that a yeshiva's Har
Etzion, right, Har Etzion
Sure.
in Alon Shvut.
Mm-hmm.
He had a tremendous, honestly, influence on me as being one of the most sincere, genuine Yorei Shemayim I've probably, to this day. And not that I was on number one like in the Lumdis part, but as a personality, as a role model, he certainly. Later on, I became a rebbi. I learned that in Yeshivas Rabbi Yitzchok Eisenman for quite a while, 11 years.
Who were your rabbim?
So I was Rav Parnas, who I think needs a refuah shleima, I think he's not well now. I was very close to him.
Sure.
And then I went to Rav Soloveitchik Shir, and I was in Rav Soloveitchik Shir until he unfortunately stopped saying Shir. And from there I went to Rav Hershel Shechter, and I was by Rav Hershel Shechter. I got married, and I stayed 6 years in their kollel, and I learned also by Rav Nissen Alpert, the Talmud of Rav Moshe. And
that's quite a lineup of rabbeim, I would say.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem, I was very privileged, yeah. And then actually went further because when I left, I got a position at an 8th grade rebbi at the yeshiva in North Jersey. I think now it's called RYNJ, the Rosenbaum Yeshiva in North Jersey. So I became the 8th grade rebbi there. It was located originally in Teaneck. Then it moved to Ridgefield, And then finally they bought a building in River Edge. And I was there for 12 years. 12 years I was the 8th grade rebbi. And that was a wonderful experience. On my second year there, we moved to Passaic. We were living in Washington Heights at the time, learning the kollel at the YU, so it was obviously it was convenient to live on Bennett Avenue. And then we moved to Passaic. And as Hashem would have it, we were living on Ascension Street, which is the exact street where the yeshiva Gedola is. And the yeshiva Gedola, we're talking about 1989. In 1989, Passaic maybe had 200 families. So Baruch Hashem, again, I'm certainly not a Talmud Mufak, but over the last 30 years, I've had this list of being close to Reb Meir Stern, the yeshiva, should live and be well. Initially, I finished teaching by 12:45, so I was in the yeshiva by 1:15 till 10 o'clock at night.
Really? In Yeshiva Gedola Passaic?
Yes, I used to, his chaburas I would attend, shiurim of his I would attend. All his shmuzin, I heard all his shmuzin for 8 years. Because I would go to Yiddish shmuzin on Shalosh Yiddish. And that had a huge influence on me too. Huge influence on me being in the yeshiva there and having a relationship with him. That was a major hashpah, a major influence.
Mm-hmm. Now, growing up, going back to the years when you were in Har Etzion and later on in yeshivas, Rabbi Yitzchok Eisenman, did you have aspirations to go into the rabbanos? What was your dream at that point as far as being mashpia and using your talents?
It's interesting you said that. This memory actually came to me recently. I still remember it was Parshas Tazria Metzora. I was probably 16 or 17 years old. My mother, Alei Shalom, she was a teacher, as many Jewish women were, in the New York City public school system. It's a very good job. You're off for the summer, and even in the short Fridays in the winter, you were home by 3:30. She worked not so far from Canarsie. And she had a non-frum colleague whose son had a bar mitzvah, and she didn't know who would help the boy write a bar mitzvah speech. I remember it was the haftarah of the Arba Mitzaroim, the 4 Mitzaroim there, Tazria Metzora. And my mother asked me, I said I'd be glad to. And Motzei Shabbos, anyway, I used to have a chavrusa. So Motzei Shabbos, I sat down and I wrote him a drasha, and then I handed it in. I remember she called me, the woman, she said, I'm so impressed. On a Saturday night, you spent writing that, you could have been out with your friend, okay, whatever. And I remember when I gave it to my mother said, oh, this is your first drasha. So, I mean, I'm not saying I aspired always to be a Rav, but I did aspire to teach. I always liked teaching. Mm-hmm. And in fact, when I was at YU, I was more in the educational track. I mean, it didn't really matter, but to be a rebbi, I always wanted to be a rebbi.
And you received actual training for that? You were talking about when you were in YU?
Yeah, I think now actually it's more structured. Back then I think it was structured, but not as structured. Yes, yeah. Certainly. Well, truthfully, I was privileged also to learn from Rabbi Yoel Kramer. Should live and be well. I think he lives in Lakewood now too. He for Torah Masorah for years, he gave courses in how to teach.
Right.
And I took his course over the summer. And in fact, interesting, we used to go to Menorah Bungalows where I was a rebbi. And Rabbi Herschel Brody should live and be well. He now lives on Lakewood too. He was sort of the unofficial Rav there. So Diane Brody was there, and again, I was zeicha to become close with him. I learned with him Bechavrusa. Our families became close. I remember I was living in the Heights. I went to him for sukkahs for a number of times in Borough Park, and there also, so in that, I remember one summer they had Rabbi Yoel Kramer was giving a course in teaching, and I remember in class control, and so that helped me a lot. Still does, the idea of how to present yourself. And I try to have even brief relationships to have. When I lived in Washington Heights, the Novominsker Rebbe, Rabbi Yaakov Perlow, Zechron Levracho, he used to say, originally he was Rosh Yeshiva in Breuers for many years. And then after his father was nifter, he took over the Chassidus, but he would still come Thursday nights to say a Chumash shiur. And they were looking for people always to drive him back to Borough Park. And it wasn't the most sought after position because it involved trying to find parking in Washington Heights at about 12 o'clock at night, which was, but nevertheless, I took advantage, and I don't regret it. A number of times I had the chus of spending, an hour with him privately, hour and a half with him privately, driving him, to, so that was also a special.
Any particular memories that you have of driving the Rebbe, stories, or your Rabbeim like Rav Alpert, Rav Soloveitchik, Rav Schechter, and so on?
So one about the rebbi, and I have to be honest, it was published already in Mishpacha magazine, but still. When I was driving him, so it's interesting, when he was in Washington Heights, he was Rav Perlau. All the Balabatim, all the Broyers Balabatim, he was Rav Perlau. I mean, they knew Novominsker Rebbe, but he was at Rav Perlau. And when we would go, he would get into the car, and as soon as we went over the Brooklyn Bridge, he became the Novominsker Rebbe. And for instance, and nothing was ever said, but it was understood. For instance, sometimes he would tell me he has a vart, if we can stop on whatever, on 14th Avenue and 42nd Street, if we can stop there in a vart. So I understood. He never said a word. But I understood that I was supposed to open the door for him at that point and to walk him in. And this happened quite often because he had many obligations. So I would stay a few minutes, and then once again, nothing was ever said, but he would look at me in a way which I understood that it was time for the Rebbe to go, and I would walk over, and and he would say, "Oh, my driver's here, whatever," and we would go. So I remember once we went to a vort, whatever it was, and he gave me that eye look, and I started to walk over, and one of the Balabatim, I guess, was waiting to speak to him or what have you. And as I got closer, one of the men said to me, "Here," and he put a $20 bill in my hand, and he said to the Rebbe, "It's okay, the Balagola can wait, and here, let him go eat some cake." And I remember the Rebbe said, "He's not my Balagola. He's my chavrusa. We talk together in the car and learning. He's not my Balagola." And the sensitivity is something, which leaves a very big impression. In the same vein, when I was an 8th grade Rebbe, I always wanted my students, especially most of them grew up in Teaneck. At that point, Teaneck was a very young neighborhood. I often thought that they never saw a zaken. Never, like growing up in Brooklyn, you saw Borough Park, Williamsburg, you saw a zaken. So I tried, and I was successful. I took the class to Rav Pam, Zichrono Livracha. We went to Rav Pam, and I remember when I asked Rav Pam, "Can I come? I'm bringing an 8th grade." He said, "Sure. Can you tell me how many are coming?" So I said, "Well, there's 12 boys in the class. I'll be coming. Probably one of the administrators will be coming, assistant principal. So, 14. He said, "At 14? I said, "Yeah." And it struck me a little that he wanted to know the exact number, but be that as it may. So the day comes, and we're driving. It happened to be the school hired a from bus driver, from bus driver. And we're driving into Brooklyn, and a lot of times there were trips to Brooklyn, but usually to Avenue J, to the pizza store, whatever. And he sees that we're going to Kensington. He sees that we're going over there, within not the usual place, in a residential area. And he said, "Well, where are we going?" I said, "Oh, we're going to Rav Pam." So the bus driver said, "Are you going to Rav Pam? Do you think he'll mind if I come in too?" So I said, "Look, ein oreach machnis oreach. I can't, I'm a guest myself, but, I can't stop you from going to see a Godol Ador." So he came in, the driver. As soon as we came in, Rav Pam said, "Oh, so glad you came, so glad you came. I'm a little old now. Do you boys mind helping me set up the chairs?" Of course, they said, "No problem." I remember, besides that its house was the most simplest Pashida house you could imagine. The furniture was 50 years old. It stayed exactly the way it was. And he started to go, I think there are 2 chairs in the kitchen, squeezed in between the refrigerator and the cabinet over there. And then there's another 2 chairs hanging by the basement door on a hook. And there's another, under the couch you'll find 2 or 3 more chairs. No chair matched. Each chair was different. I remember there were papers on the table. His wife must also work for the public school. I remember there were UFT, the United Federation of Teachers, things. I remember them from my own house. And whatever and Rav Pam is standing at the table, and the boys are taking seats. And Rav Pam is standing there quietly, and all of a sudden Rav Pam realizes that there are 15 people in the room. So Rav Pam looks at me and he said, "Didn't we say 14? So I put my head down, I didn't answer. And at that point the bus driver realized that he was the odd man out, he was 15th. So he said, "It's okay, I sit all day, I'll stand. It's okay, I'll stand. I just want to be here with the rebbi. It's okay." I remember Rav Pam, who was still standing, he said in the most gentlest, most beautiful voice, he just said, "It's not okay. It's not okay. We have to get you a chair. It's not okay." And Rav Pam remained standing until finally the bus driver himself chapped. There was a coffee table that was there. He pushed it towards the table, towards the other table. He sat down, and only after he was sitting down, the bus driver, then Rav Pam sat down. And interestingly enough, it made such an impression on me. I've told that story over many times. I've told it over to my children many times. My son, Meir, who I mentioned before, lives in the Old City as a tour guide. Just recently he told me, often he takes people and they want to go to Gedolei Yisrael. Mm-hmm. He told me recently, I didn't want to know, and he didn't tell me, of course, the name of the Rav, but they went to a big Rav, and also, everyone sat down, the tour, the people he was guiding, the clients, and there wasn't a chair for him. So, he said, "I'll stand." And the Rav nobody said anything, and he stood. And he called me and he said, "Ta, I remember the story you told me with Rav Pam, and now I really appreciate it, because I felt, I'm okay, but I felt what it was that just to be standing as the odd man out." Mm. And I felt what Rav Pam, how his sensitivity towards others. Mm-hmm. So there was, and the same thing with the Novominsker Rebbe. That's a very big thing that I've seen from people, the sensitivity. You mentioned, remember Rav Hershel Schechter, I was in the kollel, and honestly on Sundays in the June, and this time of the year, whatever, in June, they weren't always, everyone was filled on Sunday afternoon, some people had jobs, whatever, and the air conditioning didn't work, and it was a hot day. It was just me and maybe another person and Hershel Schechter. The windows were open, and everyone was learning in their shirt sleeves, Rav Schechter too. And some man wandered in, he was selling yamlukes, tzitzis, a few svarim, and he was like disappointed because nobody was there. So they asked this guy, they asked me, then he went over to Rav Schechter and he said, you want, I think Rav Schechter bought a yarmulke, then he said, you look a little old, what do you do here? So Schechter said, I learn here. So he goes, don't worry, you'll one day graduate too. You'll graduate too. And Schechter said, okay, good, I hope so. I hope so. And so that's a big thing that I try to
see the humility, which I should mention in your articles, of which this book right here, which was published some years ago, is a compilation of those articles. In many of your articles, the stories depict a lot of ben adam lachavera, humility, sensitivity, thinking of others. It sounds like many of those lessons were drawn from your rabbeim. People who knew Reb Nissen Alpert was Anav Gadol Moed. Your rabbeim were Anavim, and you talked about Reb Meir Stern, Rav Pam, and others. That's definitely, it sounds like that's a common thread in a lot of the messages that you impart both in your writings and I imagine in your drushes as well.
Yes, I think I saw once in the Igros of the Chazon Ish, So he writes, I can't quote it verbatim, but he says, my biggest task in life, or ma'od ani machmir, shelo ligrom tsar afilu muat leben adam, not to cause anybody tsar. That made a big impression on me. That letter of the Chazon Ish, especially that sometimes we look at him as the person, the shiurim, this chumrah, Chazon Ish shir, which he was, but he writes what he cared about the most was never to hurt another human being. That made a very, very big impression on me.
Now, in addition to serving as a Rav of Ahavas Israel, you also serve as, I think it's called Professor of Judaic Studies at Landers College for Women. What does that job entail?
Right. Right. The better Shul's Ahavas Israel.
Ahavas Israel, what did I say?
Yeah, Hadas.
Adas? Ahavas Israel of Passaic,
Right.
which can I know is a large kihila.
Yeah.
I think you have over 40 minyanim a day, something of that sort. Can I know? Ken Yirbu. But getting back to Landers, so what's your role there?
So Landers, I teach students who are all post-SEM for the most part, young women between, I would imagine, 19 and 21. And they're very, very fine students. They're interested in learning, and many of them professionally are going on to becoming physicians assistants, physical therapists, occupational therapists, psychologists. And it's honestly, it's also a very rewarding experience, being able to, honestly, I tell them, interacting with, in many ways, the next leadership of, certainly in from women, of a strong segment of the from world. Mm-hmm. And in fact, some of them later, as they go on shidduchim and this, they'll call me, and it's very rewarding, because when I'm at the Ahavas Israel, when I'm at the shul, I'm Rabbi Eisenman, which, like it or not, carries a certain position with it. But there, you're right, it's professor, it's not, but bottom line, he's a teacher. And that's something that I cherish, that I don't have to, one of my articles, I don't recall it's in the book or not, but I remember Eitan Kobri, who also writes for Mishpacha, he called me personally about this. There's one article where I write, there's this person, I try to get close to him, but it never really works out. And then I try to find him, but it seems that there are always people around. And then I try to walk him home, but there always seems to be a rush. And he always seems to be pressured to go here and go there. I'm not even sure what exactly his name is. And then at the end of the article, until I realize that person is me. Mm-hmm. So, as much as I love the Balabatim, and I hope they like me, and I do love them, very, very, I've been privileged to have some of the most precious Balabatim that a Rav could want. Every one of them is very special people. But nevertheless, there has to be maintained some sort of boundary or parameter between a Rav and the congregant. So that has a lonely aspect to it, honestly. Mm-hmm.
You're saying in teaching students, it's a different relationship. You could kind of let your guard down a little? Is that what you're saying?
A little bit. I mean, I don't want to overemphasize this. I mean, I teach there twice a week. It's not like I'm one of the major movers and shakers of Torah. But it does afford me an opportunity to, especially that I drive to the city, to leave the confines of Passaic, wherever I go, to the local kosher grocery, it's still, there's Rabbi Eisenman. Mm-hmm. And here, I mean, they're not going to call me by my first name, of course, the students, but it does afford me a respite.
Mm-hmm. And over there, is it halacha, hashkafa, history? How do you choose what? Because it's Judaic studies is a very broad subject, so to speak. What is it that you're imparting to the students?
So also there, I feel very privileged. I have a leeway there what to teach. For instance, I gave a course in the Tshuvas of Rav Moshe Feinstein, Zichrono Livracha. So we went through the Tshuvas, the famous Tshuvas of Shul With A View and whatever, different famous Tshuvas of Rav Moshe. There were a lot of Sephardic girls, especially from Great Neck, the Persian community, number of students there. So we had one semester, we did Sephardic poskim. Not just the Rav Vadia, of course, Rav Vadia Yosef, of course, was a major part, but others as well, other Sephardic poskim. And which is fantastic for me, because it's all the preparation is learning. This past semester, we did the life and the writings of the Chazon Ish. And that was especially fascinating, being that he's well known, of course, only from 1933 and 1953 when he lives in Eretz Yisroel. But people don't realize he was over 50 when he comes to Eretz Yisroel. That the first 50 years of his life, he was, not totally, but he was basically a nister. Mm-hmm. And Reb Chaim Ozer, Grzinski knew who he was, but he was really, that's an amazing thing how he himself was able to morph from. He was a very quiet, quiet man. He never spoke publicly ever, but somehow he was able to become the Gadol Hador, recognized, by no less than the Prime Minister of Israel himself, when he had to go to one person to figure out how to try to alleviate some of the friction between the religious and the secular part of the country. Ben Gurion went to see the Chazon Ish. Sure. So it's an amazing thing how so we talked about his life prior to Eretz Yisroel, his life in Eretz Yisroel, and we did some of the tshuvas, some of his halachic positions. I try to show them he's not just a machmir. It's not, he was a very sensitive person, and every issue he obviously decided how he learned it and how he understood it, and there are many things that he's lenient on, and so that's also was very special.
You're giving the girls a perspective that maybe they never had and may never get again. It's a tremendous opportunity.
Yeah, it is.
Now, as far as your writings in particular, I enjoy your candid style. You have a certain way of writing, and obviously it resonates with people. People look forward to reading what you write. I know many people like it because it's shorter and to the point, which is also, a very attractive. But where did you get your style? Did you learn it from somewhere? Did someone teach you writing over the years? What would you say about that?
So honestly, I have to admit, although many are surprised that, as you mentioned before, I went to a co-ed, very modern Orthodox yeshiva Flatbush, but I have to admit, looking back, the English department there was very serious. And honestly, I had a strong background, honestly, in writing English there. Mm-hmm. But besides that, after that, that's obviously going back 45 years. I don't know. After that, I guess practice. I just started writing. I had Rav Beryl Wine speak in my shul. Must have been, I became the Rav there in 1997. So he must have come maybe in 1999. At that point, maybe we had 30 people, 1 minyan. I don't even know if we had a mincha minyan then. And he spoke, and he came half hour early because there was no traffic in this. So I asked him, what should I do as a Rav, a new Rav? He told me, keep writing, keep writing, keep writing. You'll see, you'll get better, you'll get better, you'll get better. And I've tried to follow that advice.
Oh. Many of your stories involve congregants. You talk about exchanges, people come to you for advice. How do you handle the confidentiality part of it? I always wonder when I read stories, and some of them are very personal. Do you alter details? How do you handle that part of it?
So in referencing another well-known ArtScroll publication, think it's called Tales Out of Shul or Tales from the Shul by Rabbi Feldman.
Rabbi Emanuel Feldman.
Rabbi Emanuel Feldman, who I consider a mentor. I feel very privileged to be close with him. And I remember when I started writing, I said, "How did you write this book?" I said, "Use names." Stories there about, I don't know, Mrs. Moskowitz, how the longest benching of the year when it's Rosh Chodesh and Hanukkah, and Shabbos and Ritzei, Ala Yovo, Ala Nisim. So he told me right then that men become women, women become men, names get changed. So that's still the model I follow. There's no doubt that I always tell that there was a time, I still remember I walked in once to the kosher grocery and someone came over to me and said, "Rabbi Eisenman, hey, I'm here. Maybe you could write a story about me. Can I do something that you write a story?" And then my wife told me that I went to the local Svarm store. There's a Z Berman there in Passaic. I was there. And my wife told me later that a daughter of a friend of hers saw me there and she ran out because she was scared that I'd write a story about her. So I have to quell everybody's apprehension that everything has changed that you can never identify. I mean, everything is true the story, but the presentation is in a way that confidentiality is totally, to the extent I wrote a story about a very moving story, and about had to do with fertility, a very sensitive topic. And I said, often I'll send it to the person before I publish. And it's so changed around, I don't think the person themselves even could recognize themselves in it. Mm-hmm. I mean, they understood, but so in that way, things will be changed around.
Now, of the stories that you've written, are there any one or two in particular that you would say are your favorite or that you think really packed a punch more than the others?
When I first started writing, as every Rav, it was totally Divrei Torah. Dvar Torah on the Parsha, or on davening maybe for the day, a short little, like it is. Actually, this came out of originally daily. Now, whenever I can, I try. But all these articles appear in what's called the short vort. The short vort is a mailing list, an email list where I send out things. And after a while, I started to realize that, Baruch Hashem, I don't have to recreate the wheel. There's so many Divrei Torah that's sending out email. I don't have to be, Mosif, Baal Tosef. I don't have to add on. So I figured maybe I could add on different things that happened to me in the shul that I took lessons from. There was the incident of the massacre at Merkaz Harav. And at that point, which we all were obviously extremely, extremely moved by and horrified. And I saw in the Ated or wherever it was that the Belzerov went to visit the wounded. He went to the hospital to visit the wounded. And I was so moved by that. I was so moved by his caring. It's one thing, statement, even Zaga Kapitel Tillim is one thing. But a man who's one of the major Hasidic rebbis in the world, and certainly in Eretz Yisroel, took the time to go visit people who they don't identify identically as far as the state of Israel and its significance. And he went to visit them, and that moved me very much. So I wrote a short vort. I wrote a column called "Why Am I a Belzer Chassid?" or "Why Am I a Chassid of Belzer?" I don't even remember. It was the first time I wrote something, if I can use that expression, that went quote unquote viral. Mm-hmm. And I got a call from Sruli Besser asking if he can reprint it in Mishpacha magazine. And from there, eventually, they approached me if I would write a column. Mm-hmm. So that article, I remember it moved me very much, and how I got calls, honestly, from all over the country, people. So that was, I guess, for me, a memorable article that made a very big impression. In fact, it made such an impression on me that when I went to Eretz Yisroel the next time, I was able to get a very quick appointment with the Belzer Rav, because I found out that he had read it too. I don't know, not in English, but he had read it too.
Now, as a Rav and also as someone who has worked in Chinuch, just not to belabor the following point, but we have you here, so to ask you, what's a good Chinuch message for today to inspire youth? I'm sure that as a Rav you've dealt with questions of Chinuch, of parents coming to you. Some people say it's harder today than any other time in the past to inspire youth to connect to Yiddishkeit, to connect to Liman HaTorah. Others will say there's more opportunities today than there ever been. So, there are different ways of looking at it. But what would you say from the perspective of a mechanech and also a Rav as to what's an effective chinuch message that you would impart to parents and to educators who are listening?
I would say that to be so sincerely and authentically caring, and that the child or the student recognize the fact that you care about them, you sincerely care about them. We live in a time, I'm sure you've had this as well, where you can speak to someone on the phone and you can hear, sometimes very lightly, but you can hear they're typing. And people call it multitasking. I think it used to be called, listening with half an ear. I mean, not really caring. Certainly not caring 100%. And to look at someone and to make eye contact, and to say you care, to remember that Rav Pam, it's not okay that somebody stands. That story happened like 30 years ago, and I'll remember it for the rest of my life. So I think that too often in life, I mean, the most terrible thing, of course, is looking at your phone. It's a terrible thing. But I think, look, a child or a student may not do exactly they're not going to be our clones. We weren't our parents' clones. We shouldn't expect our children to be our clones. But that the child knows that you authentically and sincerely care about them, be it a student or a child. I think that's something which you can never go wrong with, which is always something which is critical and necessary.
Now, there are two questions that were suggested actually by viewers. We've never asked this before as part of our program, but I think they're two excellent questions. So if the Rav would allow, I'd like to ask you both of them. The first is there any particular sefer or book that over the years, whether from your youth or even till now, or something you've discovered over the years that profoundly inspired you or that you connected to in a particular way? We are in the world of ArtScroll here, so we figured it's an appropriate question. Right. And it could be something from Sifrei Kodesh, could be literature, or, people get inspired in different ways. It could be Mili Da'alma, could be Mili Dikdusha.
Right. I mean, obviously, in general, I guess, before anything, obviously, Mili Kedusha in its totality of Torah, there's nothing more inspiring and there's nothing more life-changing than the study of Torah, whatever it is. I mean, it's as profound as, even as some people think simple, but as profound as being Marba Sedra with Rashi, or learning a Tosfos, or learning Mesilas Yesharim. I mean, the totality of Torah in and of itself is something which is obviously the most life-changing experience. But if we had to do specific books, leaving out the totality of Torah itself, so honestly, I don't think I'd be alone with saying that ArtScroll's Rebitz and Kanievsky, extremely, extremely powerful book. Wow. Extremely powerful book. Having the privilege of being by Reb Chaim many, many times, and of spending time with her, and speaking about her, and through her finding about her father, and my daughter-in-laws and their connection with her. So that book made a very big impression on me.
It's interesting you mentioned that, and we could check the numbers with the members of our sales department here, but I believe it's the best-selling biography of all time at ArtScroll. So I guess that kind of validates how much you connected with the book. Apparently many other people did as well.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah. In a secular book, I would have to say Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, he was a Viennese psychiatrist who the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, put him in Auschwitz. And while he was in Auschwitz, he figured out, how am I going to survive here? And he figured out and he writes, okay, he's not a rebbi, but he said, certainly HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there, but, he says whatever it is, when you have meaning in life, that changes everything. And honestly, if we think about it, that's without hope, without something to live for, life becomes, as he says, those were the people who he knew were not going to survive Auschwitz. Wow. But those people who had that, whatever it was, a connection with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, or whatever, for him, by the way, it was his writings, his psychiatry, and he did survive. Mm-hmm. He did survive, and he did write this book, which has been translated into probably over 20 languages and has sold millions of copies. That was a very powerful book, Man's Search for Meaning.
On that note, speaking of powerful messages, the other question that someone suggested asking was, if you had the opportunity to address the largest gathering of Jews that you could imagine, what would your single message be to the masses to inspire them?
Just saying it's working on the assumption that I'm worthy of inspiring people. So again, I certainly wouldn't ever consider myself in such a position that I would be the one chosen to be inspired. But I would still think at the end of the day it has to be what a Kodesh Baruch Hu is a meitiv. To be a meitiv, to have ava, to have love, to try to, everything that Chazal said to tell us, to try to see things from different angles, to try not to be impulsive and automatic in your reaction to this person I hold from this person I don't know, to realize the complexity of people. And when you do that, to love people and to care for people and to try to do for people, that I think is the most important message that we could have. And I'm talking about even the most simplest things in the world.
So if I may interject for a second, it sounds like that message is very similar to the chinuch message that the Rav gave just a few minutes ago. Really a similar message of being meitiv with people, is caring for people, thinking beyond ourselves, our Da'at Amas. It's a very similar message.
Yeah, 100%. But even I want to stress, when you mention like we live in a world that, if I was speaking to the largest gathering of all the Jewish people, I like to look at it when I'm on the line. The grocery is called Kosher Connection. When I'm on the line for Kosher Connection, I wrote about him too, Saul, who's one of the cashiers. Right now, he is the largest gathering of Jewish people that's in front of me. Mm-hmm. He is it. It's irrelevant. He is Klal Yisrael in front of me. I tell people, don't ever be on the phone. Don't dare be on the phone, ever, when you go on a checkout line, Jew or non-Jew. There's nothing more disrespectful. You're not there, this checkout man. You're not there. I'm on the phone. And you talk twice and this, get off your phone. There's a human being you can interact with now. So honestly, sometimes I'd rather look at the world as speaking to one person as opposed to having this idea of having to speak to many. What's the one thing we can do each time that I speak to you, I speak to this person, I go outside now, I would buy gas, that person who I buy gas from, it makes all the difference in the world.
Well, thank you so much for that message, which is a universal one. I'm sure it's something that all of us on our own level could learn to be better at, and perfecting our ben adam lachaverei, and just our interactions with human beings in general. Thank you to you again for coming out from Passaic for this conversation, a special visit here to ArtScroll. We thank you, and on behalf of all the people who have benefited from your messages and your drushes and your inspiration, we thank you for that. And may you be zeichet to continue to educate us, uplift us for many more years in Yirtzeh Hashem.
Amen. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.